Hello and welcome to a short look at the Culture War and D&D. Normally on this channel, my focus is on the game of D&D, but of course the outside world infringes upon the world of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's been doing this for a long time. So Dungeons and Dragons has always been part of America's culture war. During the early days of the Satanic Panic, and gamers in my age group or older will recall this time period. During that time, it was claimed that Dungeons and Dragons led people to Satanism. And in my own D&D group, we had a player, Jerry, whose mother believed this, and so he was allowed to play Traveler. And once when we went to play at his house, we had to prove that we were playing Traveler as opposed to the Satanic D&D. Now, the playbook for demonizing games and other media was also developed during this time period. One example of this was the tragic and unfortunate death of James Egbert III, his suicide. It was claimed that this was caused by Dungeons and Dragons. Just like today, you're familiar with things, like the tragedies of mass shootings, etc. That's often blame is often laid at the things like movies, games, etc., as opposed to the more likely causes. So this person's unfortunate tragic death did lead to an early acting opportunity for Tom Hanks in the famous or infamous Mazes and Monsters. There was also another tragic and terrible suicide by Lee Pooling, and this was blamed on D&D, and this led his mother to start a media campaign against the game. This is probably the rise of the strong media attacks and criticisms of Dungeons and Dragons. Eventually, as with how always happens with moral panics, people move on to other things, and so the Satanic Panic ended in the United States with zero evidence of satanic activity, and things got quiet on the D&D front. But in recent years, of course, things have started to get a bit hotter. Now, as you'd expect, if you have the unfortunate tendency to follow politics, etc., in my day job, I'm a philosophy professor, so I keep up with political stuff because I do political philosophy and ethics. And the big thing now is, of course, the woke war. And before that, it was like the DI. I guess it's still ongoing. Critical race theory. It's this endless. Well, it's going to end, and eventually people get bored and tired with it and move on to some other conflict. So most of the attacks in this D&D version or D&D front in the ongoing war against woke has been against the owners of D&D, Wizards of the Coast, who are owned in turn by Hasbro. The company, over the past few years, have attempted to address some concerns about racism in the game. They revise some content, and this has resulted in some people getting angry. For example, I recall people being really mad at the idea that orcs and drow are not presented as inherently evil in the game lore anymore. Even though, of course, it's always going back way back to the original Monster Manual. You always had the option of making your monsters whatever alignment you want. More on that later. Another example, the people sometimes just recently I saw an example of this on the Facebook, of course, which I really should just stay away from that, about people being enraged by third-party content. One fairly well-known example of this is that some time ago, some players introduced wheelchair rules into the game, where you could have a character who can't walk, and they have a wheelchair, magical or otherwise, that allows them to get around in the dungeon. And when I saw that, I thought, it's an interesting idea. That sounds cool. If a player wants to have like a wheelchair to go around in the dungeon, interesting approach. It could present some intriguing challenges trying to get to the dungeon that way, just as it's difficult and not intriguing or fun to navigate the real world. But the dungeon, it could be interesting to you because you'd have the means of overcoming those challenges in a way that could enhance the game. And it might also have a positive effect of showing people just how difficult it is to navigate even our real world in such situations. And I was, of course, not surprised when some people got really, really angry at the existence of these rules, outraged that it was like too woke or something. Most recently, of course, in the news was when Elon Musk, the owner of Twitter and apparently our new co-president, God Emperor, etc., uh, stuff going on there. Elon Musk helped manufacture outrage over the false claim that Gary Gygax, the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, was being attacked and erased. If you happen to have looked at the 2024 Player's Handbook, this is clearly not true. You go to that introduction and it praises and acknowledges Gary Gygax, and the person writing the introduction says, how much they enjoyed. They got to the opportunity to spend a day with Gary Gygax, and you know, very very positive. People also sometimes point to the history of D&D, and a recent book has come out on the 50th anniversary, claiming that it's very critical in erasing, attacking Gygax. But if you actually go and read it, it's not the case. It seems to be fairly honest account of the history of gaming, presenting Gary Gygax as what he was, a human being, a complicated human being who made an incredible contribution to gaming. And so my goal here, though, is not to refight these cultural battles, but as a gamer and philosophy professor, to offer you, my fellow gamers, a hopefully useful shield against efforts to manipulate us, to uh, do bad stuff. Now, I want to emphasize that not all criticisms of D&D are part of the culture war. Gamers, since the beginning of gaming, have disagreed about rule changes, they disagreed about lore changes, and these can get quite passionate. Players can get deeply emotionally invested into the number of dice that you roll, for your character. Do you use the 3d6 six times method for generating your character? Do you use another method? Do you use point buy? And people can get really heated about that. But that's all part of a sense of criticism of debates about the game. So good faith criticism is one that's made honestly, because the person making it sincerely believes there's some problem or issue with the game. Now, good faith doesn't mean necessarily like good logic or morally good, because a person can operate in good faith. Let's say they're sincerely, honestly presenting their view, but they're sincerely wrong, or even sincerely evil, as the oddest sounds. But we're most likely to encounter not good faith criticisms, but bad faith attacks, in the context of what would seem to be either definitely culture war, possibly culture war. These bad faith attacks can be divided into three types, although this list is not exhaustive. The first form, which everyone I'm sure is familiar with, is trolling. What defines a troll is their intent. They want to make people upset and angry, and the usual advice about trolls applies here. Don't feed them. Trolls can intentionally or not serve as allies or stooges for the other bad faith actors. Now, there are also people who engage in fighting the culture wars, and for them, D&D is just a tiny, tiny, tiny niche battlefield in their broader political game. Their goal is not to make D&D better by offering criticism. Their goal is to gain political advantages, however tiny, for their side. One goal, of course, is to divide gamers against each other in the hopes of essentially destroying a broad sense of community. Not that like we're a unified community with definitive shared goals and political agendas, etc. But there is kind of a gaming community, a shared sense of hey, we're all gamers. Now, this division, of course, is part of an ancient and broader tactic of, well, everyone knows about this, ruling by dividing, divide and rule. If the people that are being ruled and exploited are wasting their energy, if we're wasting our energy fighting each other in these manufactured fights, then we're not expending energy to deal with things that really are hurting us, oppression, exploitation, etc. Now, this approach is also a way to onboard people to radicalize them. For example, someone might be drawn in to this particular thing because they are mad about the artwork portraying the orcs in the new player's handbook. They look at it and they're really mad about that. And they may find themselves on a path that eventually, through over the course of a few years, ends in, say, white nationalism. I'm not saying, that anyone who's critical about the artwork is going to become a white nationalist. But there's a pathway there. It's a way to onboard people because kind of like evil recruitment. If you run games of like evil cults, especially games like Call of Cthulhu, but also D&D, the way if you want to have a plausible like drawn methodology, they lure people in by appearing good, agreeing with people's views, and then take them into the deeper evil. Like the classic in D&D is you have the temple that appears to be pillars of the community and good, but actually they're up to some really terrible stuff. Now the third type, of course, is something we should all be familiar with on the internet. I mean, it's existed for a long time, but the internet enables it to be supercharged. Is the grifter. Like political agents, the grifter tries to divide the community with these manufactured conflicts. Now, this is not for like political gain, but for financial gain typically. This is because if you can divide a community, this leads to controversy. Controversy generates attention, and as we know from social media, attention generates money. And somewhat ironically, these grifters can also benefit their opponents by giving their opponents content to, for example, criticize in their own YouTube videos. So you get a system where someone manufactures a conflict, creating videos, they makes them some income, and people respond back to them with their videos that also make them income. So you could have like this looping system of financial gain. I'm not claiming that people responding to all this are necessarily grifters, but it can be like a nice little feedback loop. Now the grifters also, if they're good at grifting, they probably also know that their approach is good at sorting people out for future grifts. They're finding the vulnerabilities of their targets and can use these to, for example, lead people into broader political grifts and also onboard and radicalize them, not so much for political gain, but to enable more grifting. It's, if you ever wondered why, if you get these emails, scam emails, why they're often sometimes just so badly written. You look at them, you're like, whoa, what the hell is that? The grammar's off, spelling's off, etc. And people tend to dismiss it as, oh, these are just people who don't. If you're like an American, you're probably can say, oh, they just don't understand English. But that can be a possibility. But also part of it is it's like a filter because someone who doesn't notice all those grammatical and spelling mistakes, they're likely to be an easier target. And so, similarly, like when it's absurd conspiracy theories that are fronting grifts, the idea is that it's a filter. So if you go on and someone's doing, say, like a flat Earth thing, and you're like, Earth, it's like I've been in a plane, I know the Earth is round, or been out at, been out on the ocean in a boat, and I know the Earth is round. And so you wouldn't keep viewing. But if someone falls into that, they are more of a target for a grift. And it's not a matter of like intelligence, it's a matter of other factors. But I won't go into that because that's all my critical thinking philosophy stuff. So the grifters, know if they're good at it, they know how to use their grift to lead to further grifts. So what can you do, what should you do if you encounter what might be a bad faith actor? For example, on the Facebook or Blue Sky or Twitter. Easiest approach, just ignore them. Even if they're acting in good faith, ignoring them will almost certainly not be a loss. You just don't waste your time. If they're acting in bad faith and are good at being bad, they'll start breaking out, fallacies, such as making a straw person of your response, and various forms of rhetoric to exploit any responses you might make and to feed the controversy. And this could be whether they're trying to troll you, trying to do political stuff, or trying to grift you. As a practical matter, your time is definitely better spent creating D&D stuff or playing the game instead of feeding the trolls, feeding the political agents, or grifters. What if you're unsure and you're wondering, like, okay, is this person raising like maybe a good point about a change to the game, or not? So if you do want to engage, which I generally recommend against, if you even feel like slightly suspicious, why risk going down the rabbit hole? Why waste your time? If it's I'm not saying that if a conversation seems to be good and interesting, like someone's on a Facebook group that's a good group and they're raising some interesting points about say having some new varieties of orcs or something, or new approach to the drow, or some new rules, eh, or they're being critical of, say, like the balancing of a class, you may be interesting discussion. But if you're suspecting, hey, maybe they're doing some culture war stuff, best approach is just like don't don't waste your time. But if you're unsure and do want to engage, I'd recommend the following approach. This is based on being a critical thinking professor teaching this stuff. So you could try rational engagement, and you'd want to ask some of the following questions. First, is the person actually offering good reasons rather than engaging in fallacies and rhetoric? If you want to know more about fallacies and rhetoric, I've written lots of books on fallacies, available for like 99 cents. The whole backstory behind that won't go into. I got 42 fallacies, I got 30 more fallacies, I got 76 fallacies, and 110 fallacies on Amazon. Also, if you do a search on my name and fallacies, you can probably find bootleg copies of my books. And I don't really object to that as such because I'm not in it for the money; I'm in it for the philosophy. So, first question essentially: are they engaging in rational discussion? Second, are they willing to adjust their views in the face of good reasons? If you have a good point, do they say, "Oh, good point"? You're working with them. So if someone's honestly, interested in the game and they're talking about, say, like modifying a class or like a species or something, and you make a suggestion and they're like, "Wow, good idea," and they're willing to change their views in the face of reasons, or at least provide a reason why they're not a good run, then they're probably not, operating in bad faith, pardon not to these bad things. If not, you know, probably be concerned. Are they willing to listen to what you're saying and not just to attack you, but to actually, listen? If not, you again, probably not worth your time. Are they being reciprocal in terms of respect? Are they calling you like stupid and a jerk and woke and so forth? If so, you're wasting your time. You're just gonna, if you're fighting with them, you're wasting your time and feeding them. So if the answer to all these questions is, no, they're not, rational, etc. They're not engaging good reasons. They're being just, they're not being respectful. Then best thing to do is don't engage. Don't feed the troll. Do not help the recruiter. Do not aid the grifter. Now, what happens if you have a friend who is drawn in to this cultural war by trolls, political agents, or grifters? What can you do? This can be a tough situation, and I do know of groups that have lost once good players to the culture war. And attempting to directly engage or criticize people about strongly held views, no matter what they are, whether they're like in wokeness in D&D or anything, they usually has the opposite effect. It usually causes people to double down because you're engaging them, and just like in D&D, it's like you're saying you're yelling, roll initiative, and it's like you're attacking them. So from their perspective, they're under attack. So they're going to act defensively. They're going to believe you're attacking them because perhaps you are. And this makes them double down. And even in the face of like really good arguments, against their position or good criticisms, uh, and whether you're right or not, or they're right or not, they're just more likely to believe them. It's just human psychology. When criticized, most people double down. So attempting to change their mind, you'll just tend to push them away, reinforce their views. This will isolate them even more, and sadly and ironically make them even better victims for political agents and trolls and grifters. So a more effective approach, if you think your friend, is worth saving and redeemable, is to approach at an angle, not a head-on attack, but you're flanking them. You're getting that flanking, that optional flanking rule. So you want to engage them with kind rather than critical engagement. So if someone at your table seems to be getting mad about the new species rules, they're talking about it being like woke and it's Wizard of the Coast destroying the game by making a slight modification to rules that people have been using for a long time. That's sort of the custom approach has always been an option since the beginning of gaming. Um, but suppose your friend really loves character customization. They've always been, as long as you've known them, they're always trying to like asking the DM like, oh, can I play a tiefling, but can I have like a different spell, or can I be like a tiefling from that's origin is like in one of the cold lower planes? Could I have cold resistance instead of fire resistance? Maybe if someone who loves character customization, Rather than like hitting them on about the battle about the wokeness, you can say, oh yeah, I can see there's some criticism about these rules, but look at the character customization options. If you can pick any ability scores you want, you can make a character, you can optimize your character. You can really customize it. So getting into a fight about whether it's woke to have flexible stats will be counterproductive. That's a fight that no one wins. That just leads to anger. And that's kind of the design of it, to just lead to anger and isolation and separation. So the best thing is to again engage them based on what you know about their other beliefs and values. And if someone loves customization, approach it from the standpoint of customization. If someone really enjoys playing characters that kind of break stereotypes, they're the person who plays like the orc, the orc wizard or the 18 intelligence. You say, look, they're just these changes just are allowing what you like to do. They're just making it so, hey, this is not an unusual thing. Having characters that break the stereotypes is part of it's always been part of the game, but it's kind of like more part of the game. Now, there can be cases when, sadly and tragically, it's best to, as said in the movie The Thing, where you gotta cut them loose, because the point of D&D is to have fun, and if someone is making the game awful by turning the table into a culture war battlefield, everyone might be happier if they find a more suitable table. Like if you don't want a culture war going on your table, and someone's insisting on bringing the culture war, it's probably best to encourage them to find a culture war table. If there are, I guess there are, I assume there are such tables where everyone there is, on board about the changes being woke, and they're playing their own version of D&D. So speaking of your own version of D&D, in closing, I want to point to an obvious way to respond to efforts to escalate the culture war. When I run into people online or real life who are mad about some change to orcs or enraged about wheelchairs in the game, very politely and respectfully point out what I, in my own mind, call rule alpha and rule omega. These, of course, are kind of like variations on the classic rule zero. So rule alpha is that as a DM, you're free to run your game as you wish. As a player, you're free to play as you wish. And this is because no one, including Wizards of the Coast, can force you to do otherwise. With a tabletop role playing game, unlike, say, a video game like Diablo 4, where if you want to play it, you've got to play that version, and you've got to, whatever changes Blizzard makes to Diablo 4, you have to deal with them, unless you want to, somehow completely hack the system and create your own servers. But with Dungeons and Dragons, the game is whatever you want it to be. You don't like it, you don't have to have it in your game. You like it, you include it. Now, of course, choices have consequences, as people say, and so no one is required to play in your game, and no one is required to allow you at their table. So while you have the freedom to make your game whatever you want or play whatever you want, other people, of course, have the freedom to not go along with that. So if something in the game makes you angry or you don't like it, then treat it like you would treat any rule that you don't like. Like for example, if you're looking at like a particular spell, say like one of the new spells and about the evolving elementals, like wow, that's way OP. Or you have a class and you look at like like the Twilight Cleric and you're like wow, that's really OP, or the Peace Cleric, and you might take it out of your game because you think okay, that's bad for my game. And so that's fine. If something makes you angry, you don't like it, you just don't have it in your game. Always been an option since the beginning of gaming. So, rule omega. That is the rule that everyone else has the right to run their games and play as they wish. You don't have the right to force them to play your way. You've got the right to express your views. If you think wheelchairs, should not be in D&D, yeah, you can express that view. Freedom of expression. If you think that orcs should be evil, stupid, bloodthirsty killers, and drow should be evil, bloodthirsty killers, never be good. That's that's the view you can have. Freedom of expression, freedom of creativity. You have the rights to express your views, but again, this can have consequences. People are not obligated to play in your game. People are not obligated to have you at their table, and that's all part of the game. No one can force you to accept anything, and the reverse of that is you can't force anyone else in the normal course of things, course of events. So I don't think that we as gamers have anything positive to gain from these manufactured culture war fights. They just divide the gaming community, cause needless conflict, feed into this broader culture war, and enable this grifting. If you don't like something about the game, but other people do like it, like wheelchairs or orcs with the competing alignment, drow the competing alignment, etc., then the rational approach is just don't have it in your game. Just like as I gave the example before, if you don't like the Twilight Domain cleric because you think it's overpowered, or the Peace Domain cleric because you think it's overpowered, uh, just don't have it in your game. If your DM and the players are on board, it's not in your game. Easy as that. And if other people want it in their game, uh, doesn't make any sense to get mad at them because it's not hurting you. What they do at their table, is not affecting you. The fact that someone out there right now is, say, playing a peace cleric, uh, doesn't hurt any of us, except those poor monsters that are getting wrecked by that overpowered class. So my general approach is, we're all here to have fun. We're here to play D&D, and we're not here to have needless conflict and to police other people's fun. So stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the future.